If a single message could make your heart skip a beat, what would you do if it came from your husband's best friend? This isn't a story about a sudden fall. It's about every quiet step away from conscience. I reached for my phone with a sense of detachment, anticipating nothing beyond the familiar deluge of notifications, enticing shopping offers, unread emails, and messages from the group chat in which I scarcely engaged. Yet, in that moment I beheld it. An image captured in time. Initially it seemed perplexing. The picture displayed on my screen captured my likeness from a distance, hazy yet undeniably recognizable. My heart thudded against my ribs as I gazed at it, my thoughts swirling in a tempest. Who captured this moment? What is the reason behind this? Before I had the chance to fully absorb the shock, my gaze fell to the message beneath. Your beauty is truly captivating. If he only knew. A torrent of warmth coursed through my veins, swiftly succeeded by an encroaching chill of apprehension. My fingers lay motionless above the screen, caught in a silent struggle between the options to respond, erase, or feign ignorance of its existence. Yet there was no facade. This moment bore my name in every detail. I took a deep breath. The figure resonated with a sense of familiarity, excessively acquainted. It was a possession of my husband's closest companion. The atmosphere within the house abruptly grew oppressively dense. My heart raced, a relentless drumbeat in my ears drowning out all else. Every sound, every whisper of background noise, until they vanished into silence. This was not merely a faceless communication from an unknown individual, nor a chance misdialing. This was deliberate, intentional. And to my dismay, I found that I didn't hate it. The weight of that realization resonated far beyond the mere words conveyed. The rational side of me urged to put an end to this right away, to confide in my husband, to face his friend and insist on an explanation. Yet there was another facet of my being, the one I hesitated to confront, that found itself captivated. For years I had known him. He had woven himself into the fabric of our lives long before I took my vows with my husband. I always perceived him as my husband's shadow, the constant companion who seamlessly integrated himself into our lives. What could have prompted him to gaze at me in such a manner now? I let out a sharp breath and secured my phone, flinging it onto the couch as though I could create a barrier between myself and the events that had just unfolded. Yet, the moment had already taken root in my mind. The words remained etched in my memory, vivid and unyielding. If he only had the slightest inkling. What was known? That his closest companion found me beautiful? He had been observing me when my gaze was elsewhere? Was there an unspoken tension hanging in the air between us? I shook my head in disbelief. This was merely a trifle, merely an unsuitable communication, an unfortunate attempt at humor, a misinterpretation. And yet, a spark of something unknown awakened within me. It was more than mere shock. It transcended mere discomfort. It was an entity far more perilous, inquisitiveness. I made a promise to myself that I would remain silent. I would erase the message, dismiss it entirely, and act as though it never occurred. Yet again my phone vibrated. Yet another message. No need to respond. I simply wished to convey this to you. I remained rooted in place, gazing at the screen, as a profound sensation began to stir within my chest. I convinced myself that now was the time to turn and leave, to let go of the past, to safeguard all that I had created. Yet, I chose to take the very action I ought to have avoided. There was a moment of uncertainty. In that moment of uncertainty, a door swung ajar. One that left me uncertain if I could ever seal it shut again. I chose not to respond to the message. I hoped that by turning a blind eye, it would simply fade away from my thoughts. By feigning that it never occurred, I believed it would diminish its hold on me. Yet, despite my relentless efforts to cast it aside, it remained, nibbling at the fringes of my mind. The following morning unfolded with an air of familiarity. My husband pressed his lips gently against my cheek before heading off to work. The kitchen was alive with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee, a scent that whispered of familiarity and daily rituals. I endeavored to concentrate on the minutiae. The fridge hummed softly in the background, while the warmth of the ceramic cradles in my hands. Yet my thoughts continued to drift away. After glancing at my phone 3 times, I finally tossed it onto the counter in exasperation. It ought not to have held any significance. I reassured myself that it was insignificant. A fleeting moment of wonder. A transient notion. Insignificant as a momentary reverie. Yet it was not merely the message that lingered in my thoughts. It was the sensation that enveloped me as I absorbed the words. The manner in which my pulse had surged. The sensation in my stomach fluttered like a long-forgotten memory, stirring in a way it hadn't in years. I recognized the error deep down within me. Yet, awareness did not alter the reality of my emotions. I devoted the day to immersing myself in the rhythm of the ordinary. Shopping for groceries, doing the laundry, tidying up the home. I occupied my hours with activities that demanded little mental engagement. Yet, regardless of my actions, there remained an inevitable moment. A brief glimmer. As I found myself gazing out the window or clutching the edge of the counter, I became ensnared in thoughts that were best left unexamined. As the afternoon wore on, I found myself believing that I had mastery over it. It was merely a message. A single ill-considered remark that held little significance in the broader context. I would choose not to reply. I would remain unaffected by it. Yet, in that moment, my husband walked through the door. He flung his keys onto the counter, relaxed his tie, and casually remarked that he had encountered his best friend during lunch. He appeared weary. He appeared to be lost in thought. A mere whisper of a remark. A fleeting remark. Yet it settled in my chest like a heavy burden. Was he aware? Did he perceive something amiss? Did it reveal itself in my expression? I compelled myself to smile, to acknowledge with a slight inclination of the head. I feigned indifference, treating this revelation as merely another tidbit in the ebb and flow of ordinary dialogue. Yet, throughout the remainder of the evening, I sensed as though I was traversing a precarious tightrope. Each look, each moment of stillness, each unspoken word hung in the air, weighted with an intensity that seemed disproportionate. That night, as I lay in bed next to my husband, gazing at the ceiling, I came to understand that despite my efforts to banish it, the thought of him, my husband's best friend, remained haunting the shadows of my mind. I picked up my phone, mindlessly scrolling, seeking a distraction from the world around me. My thumb lingered above his name, and for a fleeting moment, I envisioned the sensation of hitting send on a message. To witness his name illuminate the screen. I did not commit that act. Yet the mere thought that I came so close was enough to send chills down my spine. The following morning, I navigated my routine with an air of contrived normalcy. A steaming cup of coffee, a hearty breakfast, and a meticulously crafted to-do list that I adhered to with precision, all in an effort to occupy my restless mind. As I stepped out of the store, there he was. He stood beside his car, phone grasped firmly in his hand, his gaze locked onto mine. My heart faltered within my chest. I might have chosen to walk away, strolled away from the intended path, feigned ignorance of his presence. Yet I found myself pausing. The pause held all the significance. It was an allowance. His gaze lingered on mine for a moment that stretched just a bit too far. His expression was a mystery, yet it crackled with an unvoiced intensity. This meeting was anything but accidental. He had been in a state of anticipation. For my own sake, my pulse raced, fingers tightening around the bag of groceries with an intensity that mirrored my rising anxiety. I urged myself to depart, that there was nothing of value for me in this place. No positive outcome can arise from this moment. Yet a smirk played upon his lips, only just sufficient for my awareness, and a transformation stirred within me. I strode by him in silence. My steps are unwavering, my expression meticulously arranged. Yet as I settled into my car and maneuvered out of the parking lot, his gaze lingered on me, palpable and unyielding. What could be more disheartening? I found it enjoyable. Uncertainty enveloped me as I grappled with the inexplicable shift within, triggered by nothing more than a solitary message and a fleeting glance that unraveled something deep within my core. Yet, as I navigated the road home, my hands clenched around the wheel with an intensity that betrayed my unease. A realization dawned upon me, one that filled me with a deeper fear than I had ever known. It was not solely him. I was the one. For years, I believed I was invulnerable, that my existence was secure, stable, and unchanging. Yet, at this moment, after so many years, I experienced a sensation unlike any other. Something wild and vibrant. I found myself uncertain about whether I truly wished to halt my course. I convinced myself that it had come to an end. The moment in the parking lot held no significance. I had envisioned the intensity of his stare, the current of energy thrumming beneath my skin. I reassured myself that I had turned my back on it all, and thus it came to a close. Yet I was not being truthful. Deep within, a transformation had taken place. Something that cannot be undone. The pull of his memory lingered, weaving through my thoughts like an uninvited guest. The mere thought of seeing him again sent my heart racing. It was a silent, searing presence, intensifying with each effort to extinguish it. Then the invitation arrived, an informal evening meal at our home. As per usual, the concept originated with my husband, not me. He was blissfully unaware of the chain of events he was about to unleash. For him, it was merely another night spent in the company of his closest companion. A familiar routine that had endured through the years. To me, it was a completely different experience. On the evening of the dinner, I navigated the house as if in a dreamlike state. My hands moved with a practiced ease, setting the table, pouring the drinks, arranging the food, all while my mind wandered elsewhere. At first glance, I appeared to be the ideal hostess, the devoted wife, executing my part with precision. Yet, beneath the surface, my nerves lay exposed. My heart raced uncontrollably. Suddenly, the doorbell chimed. I paused for a moment, gathering my thoughts before responding. I urged myself to embrace normalcy. I longed to return to the person I once was before everything changed. Yet, as I swung the door open and he crossed the threshold, an unsettling realization washed over me. It was already too late. He regarded me as if he possessed all the answers. It was as if he had been anticipating this moment with the same fervor that I had. And that filled me with dread. The night unfolded in a whirlwind of joyous laughter and engaging conversation. To the observer, we appeared as merely three individuals gathered around a table, partaking in a shared meal. Nothing out of the ordinary, everything is in order. Yet, lurking beneath the facade, it was far from ordinary. Each time our gazes intertwined from across the table, I sensed it deeply, the way he observed me when he believed he was unseen. His fingers lingered against mine for a moment too long as I handed him the glass. The game we were engaged in was fraught with peril, and then it transpired. As the night wore on, with the remnants of dinner cleared away and my husband stepping out for a phone call, the kitchen became our solitary space. The atmosphere around us transformed in an instant, crackling with an unarticulated tension, an unavoidable occurrence. I ought to have turned my back and left. Instead, I pivoted to confront him, my heart pounding fiercely, as if it might betray my anxiousness with its loud rhythm. For an extended pause, neither of us stirred. Then, with a measured grace, he extended his hand, his fingertips brushing softly against the delicate skin of my wrist. A mere whisper of a caress, almost non-existent. Yet it sufficed. Before hesitation could stop me, I found myself leaning closer. Our eyes met in an undeniable moment. A silence passed. Heavy, unresolved one moment. Perhaps a couple. A fleeting whisper in time. Yet it was sufficient to shatter something deep within me. In that fleeting moment, I realized that retreat was no longer an option. As we distanced ourselves, the weight of reality descended upon us. My breath came in fits and starts, thoughts swirling rapidly. Before I could fully grasp the weight of the moment, the back door swung open, and my husband entered, blissfully ignorant of the events that had just unfolded within our home. I swiftly averted my gaze, feigning an adjustment on the counter, urging my trembling hands to find stillness. Yet it lingered within me. The gentle press of his lips, the warmth of his caress, and, most painfully, the intolerable reality taking root within my heart. My desires reached beyond the ordinary. That night I found myself wide awake, my gaze fixed on the ceiling, the darkness enveloping me like an oppressive shroud. My husband lay next to me, his breath a calm rhythm, blissfully ignorant of the turmoil churning within me. I had stepped over a boundary, and there was no denying it any longer. The memory of that moment lingered, impossible to shake. It changed something within me. The echo of my heartbeat lingered in my ears, a reminder of the warmth that surged within me the moment his lips brushed against mine. Yet above all, I sensed the profound stillness. It loomed between us, dense and oppressive, a silence that brimmed with meaning rich and profound, brimming with an allure that defies the rules, a presence that had lingered in the depths, biding its time for the perfect opportunity to emerge. And now it had come to pass. I shifted onto my side, distancing myself from my husband, curling inward as though I could somehow banish the thoughts that plagued me. I needed to intervene before the situation escalated further. Yet, had it not already ventured too far? The incident in the kitchen was no mere coincidence. It wasn't an error in the manner that many prefer to believe. It was a decision made amidst uncertainty, a choice rendered in the blink of an eye, yet undeniably a choice nonetheless. What could possibly be worse? It was something I had longed for, not merely in the present, nor solely in the fervor of the night, but well in advance of that. Perhaps it all began with a message, perhaps even prior to that. I clenched my eyes tightly, my fingers entwined in the fabric of the blanket as a heavy guilt took root in the pit of my stomach. My husband was completely unaware. He kissed me goodnight, a gesture that felt untouched by the passage of time, as though I remained the same woman he had always placed his trust in. Yet I was not. I could never return to that state once more. The following morning I moved through the routine. Morning meal, casual chatter, a smile that seemed out of place on my lips. My husband remained unaware, and I ought to have felt a sense of relief. Yet it only deepened my sense of despair. He pressed his lips gently to my forehead before heading off to work. A shiver coursed through me at his touch, leaving me momentarily rigid. He remained oblivious. Perhaps he was aware, yet opted to remain silent. As the door clicked shut behind him, I let out a breath, my palms resting on the counter for support. My thoughts swirled in a chaotic dance, cycling endlessly, replaying the previous night like a film reel caught in an unyielding loop. Clarity was what I sought. I had to persuade myself that it was insignificant. Yet, as my phone vibrated and his name illuminated the display, the truth of my self-deception became undeniable. One solitary message, simple, straightforward, and unadorned. Only 3 words. It's time for a conversation. My hands quivered as I gazed upon it. I ought to have turned a blind eye to it. My fingers danced across the keys, a flurry of motion that my mind could not rein in. Where might one find it? The reply arrived with remarkable speed. Identical location. In this moment, a decision. Once more. This time I acted without a moment's pause. The coffee shop greeted me with a serene hush, the afternoon stillness enveloping the room like a gentle whisper. I noticed him right away, nestled in the corner, fingers encircling a cup, his eyes fixed on the table as though lost in contemplation. I found myself on the brink of retreat, ready to walk away and persuade myself that none of this had ever transpired. Yet, as he raised his gaze, I took a seat. For an extended stretch of silence, we remained wordless. The tension hung between us, palpable and electric, the aftermath of our past still echoing in the atmosphere. At last, he let out a breath, his hand gliding over his jawline. "This isn't something we can accomplish," he stated. Hearing him say it should have brought a sense of relief. It ought to have been precisely what I desired. Yet it seemed more like a test of resolve. For if that were indeed the case, we would not find ourselves in this very moment together. I inhaled deeply, selecting my words with precision. "So, what is the reason for our existence?" He hesitated before responding. Instead, his eyes fixed intently on me. In that fleeting moment, the truth revealed itself to me. Neither of us was prepared to part ways with this. Neither of us had any desire to, and that was the most perilous aspect of it all. The coffee shop lingered in my mind, the silence enveloping us, his words suspended in the atmosphere, unvoiced yet profoundly grasped. Neither of us had articulated the thoughts swirling in our minds, yet the atmosphere crackled with an undeniable truth. This was a mutual desire of ours. The kiss had transcended its initial significance. It transcended mere moments of contact or the subtle exchanges of sight. It delved into a realm far more profound, something that had quietly taken hold, unnoticed by either of us. I had persuaded myself that it was merely a fleeting lapse, an impulsive error. Yet, as I reflect on that conversation, I recognize that a change has occurred. The allure had transcended mere physicality. It was filled with emotion as well, an unexpected connection between us. A delicate thread intricately woven between us, drawing tighter with each passing day. I ought to have put an end to it. I ought to have retreated before matters escalated any further. Yet I refrained. The allure was overwhelming, utterly all-encompassing. Each moment he drew close, each fleeting glance exchanged from across the room, each text or message he sent a thrill through my heart, making it race with anticipation. What could possibly be more disheartening? I found it enjoyable. After years enveloped in the comfort of a stable and predictable marriage, I found myself watching as everything began to unravel in just a matter of weeks. I had shed the identity of the woman who adhered to the constraints of convention. I existed as a different person altogether. A soul drawn irresistibly toward the allure of the forbidden. With every line we crossed, with every boundary we pushed, I sensed myself slipping further from control. Time slipped away in a haze, a relentless loop of guilt and longing that I found impossible to escape. I shared moments with my husband, donning the guise of the wife he had always recognized. A smile graced my lips. A chuckle escaped my lips. I fulfilled the obligations that were expected of me. Yet, deep down, my mind wandered to another place entirely. The burden of the secret bore heavily upon my shoulders, the unyielding pressure in my chest that suffocated my breath. I had always struggled with the art of deception, and yet each day I discovered myself weaving tales untruthful. I deceived my husband, misled myself, and concealed the truth from everyone in my vicinity. And then he appeared, the companion who had overstepped boundaries, who had sown this seed within me and now denied it the chance to flourish. We conversed in hushed tones, gathered in secluded spots, all the while maintaining a facade of normalcy to the world beyond. Yet, whenever we found ourselves in solitude, the atmosphere became charged with the tantalizing potential of what could unfold. We were acutely aware of the peril that lay ahead. We were both acutely aware of the repercussions that lay ahead. Yet, the fear was equally as intoxicating as the longing. Thoughts of him consumed my mind increasingly, as I pondered the possibilities of surrendering, to allow the outcomes to unfold, to ultimately acknowledge the tension that had been simmering between us for weeks. Each encounter between us was fraught with an intensity that was almost too much to bear. A silent question lingered in the air, unspoken yet palpable. Shall we continue onward? Is it possible for us to carry on and emerge unscathed? Yet, every moment spent in his presence, I felt the familiar sting of self-deception creeping in once more. This transcended mere physical attraction. The allure did not stem from the excitement of engaging in something taboo. It delved into a realm far beyond the surface. A challenge I found myself unprepared to confront, a truth I found difficult to acknowledge. On a Friday evening, the event unfolded. My husband envisioned a serene evening for just the two of us. He had arranged for our beloved takeout, and we were meant to ease into the evening, letting the stresses of the week melt away. Yet, my concentration eluded me. My focus eluded me entirely. The burden of the secret felt insurmountable, excessively broad. I informed him of my intention to take a stroll, merely to refresh my thoughts. He refrained from questioning me. He never did. Stepping into the cool embrace of the night, an unfamiliar sense of liberation washed over me. After weeks of suffocating tension, a sense of relief washed over me, allowing me to finally take a breath. The burden of all I had concealed lingered, yet it no longer felt as stifling. For a fleeting instant, I sensed that I wielded the reins of my own existence. Yet that illusion proved fleeting. As I rounded the bend, he came into view, standing there before me. He had not anticipated my arrival, not quite. Yet, upon catching sight of me, he acted without a moment's pause. Silently, he advanced, and in an instant, He looked at me with that same intensity as before, this time leaving me momentarily breathless. I might have chosen to withdraw. I had the power to prevent it. However, I did not. At that instant, I found myself unwilling to do so. For an extended period, I resided in a realm of assurance, where everything was comprehensible, where every element found its rightful position. Yet, as I stood there in the shadows beside him, it dawned on me that I was transforming. I found myself uncertain about the desire to cease. I had ventured beyond a boundary, and retreat was no longer an option. The kiss that night ought to have marked the definitive conclusion, the line I had vowed never to cross again. Yet it was not. It fell far short. The following morning, I awoke to the weight of the previous day's events still bearing down on my chest. The kiss transcended mere fleeting seconds. It revealed a complexity beyond anything I had ever imagined. The stillness of the days gone by, the burden of the unspoken truth that lay between us, had been stifling. Now it felt nearly stifling in an entirely different manner. It brimmed with a mix of anticipation, dread, and an exhilarating thrill that I found impossible to overlook any longer. As I stood before the bathroom mirror, brushing my hair, I beheld my reflection. This woman was a stranger to me now. The visage that met my gaze was that of a person who had succumbed to chaos, a person who succumbed to a temptation she had vowed to resist. I experienced a profound disconnection from the version of myself that had once found solace in the familiar comforts of her existence. At that moment, I sensed I was precariously balanced on the brink of an unknown precipice, unsure if I possessed the power to halt my descent. I made an effort to concentrate on the ordinary aspects of life, donning my attire, crafting a morning meal, navigating the familiar cadence of my daily rituals. Yet everything felt like a haze. My mind continually returned to him, to the kiss. I had always convinced myself that I was not the kind of person who would allow circumstances to spiral beyond control. I was the steadfast one, the unwavering presence, the spouse. Yet here I stand, pondering my very essence. I found myself a woman adrift in her own yearnings, where the lines that once appeared so distinct now seemed to waver like mist, vanishing each time I attempted to grasp them. My husband remained blissfully unaware, completely unsuspecting of the truth that lay hidden beneath the surface. He remained the man he had always been, naive in their affection, blissfully ignorant of the tempest brewing just out of sight. His eyes reflected a deep concern, a silent acknowledgement of my uncharacteristic demeanor, yet he chose not to voice his questions. The weight of guilt only intensified. It gave me the sensation of inhabiting two distinct existences. One life, the life I had vowed to share with him, clear, reliable, secure. The other, a revelation of a capacity I had yet to discover within myself. Intricate, chaotic, and undeniably authentic. It was during the stillness that I encountered my greatest battles, those instances of solitude, where my mind wandered freely, untouched by the noise of the outside world. In those moments, I found myself recalling the sensation of his hand, the warmth of being embraced by someone other than my husband. It transcended mere physical sensation. The intensity enveloped me, a sensation of being truly seen, a rarity I hadn't experienced in years. It prompted a profound reevaluation of all that I believed. And then, naturally, there were the moments that followed, the covert glances, the hidden notes, the ephemeral caresses when the world remained oblivious. Every single one served as a poignant reminder that this was an irreversible reality. It was a decision we had reached in unison, a decision that, despite my attempts to rationalize it, had transformed everything. A few days passed before I found myself once more in his solitary company. With my husband away on business, the house settled into an unsettling silence. I had persuaded myself that I would dedicate time to clear my mind, to restore a semblance of equilibrium. Yet, my thoughts continually wandered back to the choice I had been desperately attempting to evade. The moment the knock echoed through the air, I found it impossible to turn a blind eye. There he stood before me, an embodiment of both solace and disquiet. His gaze locked onto mine, an unspoken expectation hanging in the air. Yet the words eluded me. This was never part of my intentions. This moment caught me off guard. Yet there it stood, facing me, its gaze piercing through the silence, posing a question I was certain I could not resolve. "I shouldn't be here," he murmured, his voice heavy with unvoiced emotions, yet the expression in his eyes conveyed everything. The moment for reconsideration had long since passed. I moved aside instinctively, without a thought or a question as to why, and he entered the house. The gravity of the choice I faced was not lost on me. With each step I took, with every breath I inhaled, and with every pulse of my heart, I sensed it deeply. Yet I found myself unable to halt. I was reluctant to bring it to an end. There we were, poised in the heart of my dwelling, silence enveloping us like a heavy cloak. The atmosphere surrounding us was laden with all that we had sidestepped, and still it seemed unavoidable. He extended his hand first, a gentle touch against my arm, and that was all it took. It was sufficient to strip away the last remnants of my self-control. He looked at me with that same intensity as before. This time, and this kiss transcended simplicity. It was a declaration. It was an act of capitulation. As we finally parted ways, silence enveloped us, leaving no words to bridge the distance. We were acutely aware of the unfolding reality, and deep down we understood that retreat was not an option. In the wake of that moment, the facade crumbled, and I could no longer maintain the illusion. The boundaries had faded into obscurity, and the journey I had been traversing now seemed to guide me along a path from which I doubted I could ever find my way back. A weight settled in my chest as I confronted the truth of my decision, a decision that remained irrevocable for all. The peril of it, the excitement of it, was utterly captivating, yet I was acutely aware that it bore its own set of repercussions. It was a decision I would have to bear for the rest of my days. A decision that, inevitably, I would have to confront. Yet, in this very moment, my mind was consumed by the sensation of being enveloped in his embrace. How all else, all that had once appeared so significant, dissolved into insignificance in his presence. Even as guilt gnawed at my conscience, and I recognized the wrongness of my actions, a part of me had grown indifferent to it all. I had ventured beyond the boundaries. There was no turning back now. The days that followed that moment unfolded in a whirlwind of chaos. A tempest of silence brewed within me. The weight of my actions pressed down on me, the promise I had made to safeguard a life becoming increasingly burdensome with each ticking moment. I navigated my days as if adrift, untethered from the familiar rhythm that had previously grounded me. The mornings proved to be the most challenging, as I awoke next to my husband, listening to the comforting cadence of his breath, fully aware of his unwavering trust in me, even as I felt myself slipping away. Each look from him served as a poignant reminder of the woman I once was, a woman who held steadfast to loyalty, to honesty, to the promises I had made. Yet now each word, each glance appeared steeped in remorse. It was inescapable. The memories of that night haunted me, each replay igniting the warmth of his touch and the allure of an unexpected desire within me. I endeavored to concentrate on the minutiae. I completed the laundry, crafted meals, and endured conversations that scarcely made an impression on my thoughts. Yet, all around me, there was an overwhelming sense of pretense, as if I were donning a mask that had begun to slip, no longer aligning with my true self. And then there existed the contrasting perspective, the aspect I found impossible to overlook. With each message he sent, with every ring of the phone, I sensed the allure tugging at me, an unseen force weaving its way into my thoughts. I promised myself I would remain silent, that I would resist the urge to slip back into familiar habits once more. Yet my fingers deceived me, crafting replies before my thoughts could even align. It transcended mere desire. It transcended the mere act of a kiss or the fleeting sensation of a touch. It revolved around my desire to be acknowledged, in a manner that transcended the character I had embodied for an extended period. In his presence, I experienced a profound sense of vitality. After years of longing, I finally experienced a sense of being desired, and it was different from the familiar affection my husband had always shown me. A profound intensity lingered, a perilous allure that I found impossible to dismiss, regardless of my attempts to persuade myself otherwise. Unbeknownst to my husband, of course, He remained blissfully unaware that with each smile he cast in my direction, I bore the heavy burden of a secret that was gradually devouring me from within. He remained oblivious to the fact that as I pressed my lips to his in a tender good night, my thoughts wandered to another. He remained unaware that the life we had crafted together, which I had once believed to be flawless, was gradually coming apart due to decisions I could not reverse. I experienced a profound sense of deception, donning the guise of a devoted spouse while clandestinely undermining all that I held dear. The weekends consistently proved to be the most challenging. My husband cherished every moment we shared together, and I cherished him in the manner one does for someone who has stood by your side, who understands all your peculiarities and routines, who has woven a life together with you. Yet, in his presence, my thoughts were consumed by him, the other man who had woven himself into the fabric of my existence like a haunting specter. I made an effort to steer clear of him, convincing myself that this was the preferable path. I found it necessary to separate myself from the turmoil I had brought upon myself, yet the allure was inescapable. As soon as I embraced solitude, the silence would envelop me, and I would become acutely aware of its presence. The void, the yearning, the desire for something I couldn't quite articulate. As soon as my husband departed for a brief work trip, an unsettling silence enveloped the house. The burden of the secret enveloped me, heavy and inescapable, much like a dense shroud that stifled my every breath. I made an effort to divert my attention. I visited the store, tidied up my surroundings, and took a stroll. Yet, regardless of the distance I traveled, his presence lingered, subtly infiltrating the corners of my thoughts. Suddenly, a message appeared on my phone, catching me off guard. "It's time for a conversation." I hesitated to open it at all. I nearly persuaded myself that my words had run dry. Yet, as I absorbed those words, a realization dawned upon me. I realized it had transcended the realm of inquiry. It was not a matter of choice. It was bound to happen. I had already begun my journey along this path. It was unstoppable at this point. I replied to him, "When will it be?" The reply arrived swiftly. "As the evening descends, you are aware of the location." I found myself at the familiar location, a serene park nestled on the fringes of the town. It felt like home, a sanctuary where anonymity wrapped around us like a comforting cloak, a sanctuary where we might escape the burdens of the world, if only for a fleeting moment. I brought the car to a halt and lingered for a moment, gazing into the vacant expanse ahead. Uncertainty loomed over what would unfold next. Uncertainty loomed over me, casting doubt on my readiness for the unknown that lay ahead. Yet, I found myself with no alternative. My decision was already made. Upon his arrival, there was an unmistakable certainty. Silence speaks volumes. He approached the car, and an unspoken understanding hung in the air between us, signaling that a pivotal moment was on the horizon. Silence enveloped us. The endeavor seemed utterly futile. The atmosphere surrounding us was laden with all the unspoken truths we had kept concealed. In that stillness, a profound understanding blossomed between us. As he swung the door open, I emerged, acutely aware of the familiar intensity of his gaze upon me. The gaze that had once stirred discomfort within me now seemed like a long-awaited longing fulfilled. The kiss lacked the familiarity it once held. The moment lasted longer. I couldn't ignore the pull between us. It represented the peak of all that we had been sidestepping. It was a confession of the truth we both understood, that we could never return to the past. As we distanced ourselves, I caught a glimpse of it in his gaze. The very same understanding, the acknowledgement of the decision we had embraced, and I grasped it as well. The path ahead was irrevocably set. Not at this moment. In that instant, the gravity of my actions struck me with undeniable force. The existence I once embraced was gradually unraveling, fragment by fragment. There I stood, caught in the midst of it all, powerless against the relentless surge. I had traversed the boundary, and retreat was no longer an option. There was no turning back from the course that had already been charted. Yet, amidst the encroaching guilt, another facet of my being emerged, a shadowed fragment that was still captivated by him. forever longing for the bond we once had, and I found myself pondering whether I would ever manage to break free from it. I had come to a decision, and now I must bear the weight of it. The days that followed that night seemed to dissolve into a haze, everyone seamlessly merging with the following. A vague thread of instances woven together by remorse and longing. I resumed the rhythms of my existence, as though nothing had changed. Each morning I bid my husband farewell with a kiss, meals that are ready to enjoy, maintain the illusion of the ideal spouse. Yet, deep down I sensed an unfamiliarity with my own essence. The chasm between the life I once knew and the one I now inhabited had widened to an undeniable extent. Each moment spent with my husband seemed overshadowed. It felt as though the words we shared were devoid of meaning, empty. In his gaze I beheld the essence of love, the faith he placed in me, and it only exacerbated the situation. The guilt consumed me from within. Still, the attraction to the other man, the one who had woven himself into the very fabric of my existence, was more powerful than it had ever been. I found myself on the other side of a boundary I had been blissfully unaware of. And now I found myself amidst the remnants of what had transpired. Understanding that everything had irrevocably changed, the moments shared between my husband and me grew increasingly distant. His presence was a mirror reflecting the undeniable truth that lingered in my thoughts. The reality that I had deceived him. The moment my fingers brushed against him, the burden of my actions pressed heavily upon me. The hidden truth that weighed heavily upon me. And yet, in his presence, while I donned the guise of the woman I once was, it felt as though I was suffocating beneath the weight of the deception. Yet, there were those instances when I found myself in his presence. The man who had transformed into my vulnerability. The man who had awakened a profound feeling within me that I could not dismiss. Each encounter we shared, each time I laid eyes on him, the aspect of my being that yearned for this hidden truth, this illicit longing intensified. The sensation was utterly captivating, and I found myself unable to resist. I promised myself that our paths would not cross once more. I shall bring this to a close, yet with each attempt to escape, the allure pulled me back into its grasp. The allure of that instant. His gaze upon me was profound, the manner in which we had shared our time together. It was utterly inescapable. It was an uncharted waltz cloaked in shadows that neither of us had orchestrated, yet both of us had eagerly embraced. Every furtive gaze, every clandestine text communication, every fleeting encounter in the stillness of the night, the culmination of these elements heightened the depth of the bond we experienced together. I found myself uncertain of its true nature, yet I sensed it transcended mere physicality. It was an all-encompassing force that took hold of my very being, a sensation that awakened a vitality within me, revealing depths I had yet to discover. And yet, with each step I took, I sensed myself drifting further from the life I once embraced. My journey alongside my husband, the existence that was once uncomplicated and secure, was gradually eluding me, much like grains of sand cascading through my grasp. Retracing one's steps was simply not an option. The weight of my actions bore down on me, and the mere idea of confronting the repercussions filled me with dread. Yet, what struck me with greater dread was the understanding that I had no desire to. I found myself irresistibly drawn to seek him out once more. I was aware of its wrongness. With each encounter, with every word exchanged, I felt the inexorable binding of my destiny unfold. Yet, during those instances, it seemed as though I held the reins of my destiny. It felt as though I was making a decision of significance to my life, even if it brought with it unavoidable repercussions. I had transformed into someone entirely different from the woman I once was. I had transformed into something entirely different, something beyond recognition. And yet, there was an inescapable presence that lingered. The choice to see him once more stemmed from a place of desperation, from a desire to address the tensions that had been simmering between us. The veil of secrecy no longer held any allure for me. In the embrace of stolen moments, I yearned for something greater. I needed to uncover its essence, the true significance of this bond we share. No longer could I dwell in the shadows. I sought to unveil the truth beneath the illuminating rays of daylight. Thus our paths crossed once more. Uncertainty loomed before me. I found myself uncertain if this was the moment when everything would unravel, when I would ultimately confront the repercussions of my choices. Yet, I was acutely aware that I could not restrain my impulses. As I stepped into the meeting, a sense of anticipation filled the air. Completely cognizant of the peril, completely cognizant of the repercussions, yet unable to turn away. Upon laying eyes on him, it felt as though time itself had come to a standstill. His gaze upon me was profound, as if he possessed all the knowledge in the world, as if he possessed the ability to peer into the profound recesses of my being, caused all else to dissolve into the background. In that instant, the concept of a husband vanished. I had no life to leave behind, it was just the two of us. And whatever this entity was that had blossomed between us, the bond was unmistakable, it was undeniable. Nor could he. There was an undeniable pull between us, unavoidable in its presence. It was evident in his gaze. Sense it in the gentle caress of his hand as it grazed against mine. Words eluded me. I struggled to articulate the emotions swirling within me. It transcended mere desire. It transcended the surface. Something more instinctual. It was a necessity, a restless longing that I could neither name nor silence. Yet, despite my deep desire to surrender to it, though I yearned to surrender and allow this connection between us to envelop me, the weight of its significance was impossible to overlook. The life I had constructed was impossible to overlook. The spouse who placed their faith in me, the repercussions of my actions loomed large, impossible to overlook. Yet I pressed on undeterred. Once more we accomplished it. We had crossed the line, and this time there was no turning back. And the truth took its place. More weighty than at any time in the past, escape was no longer an option. The choices I had made were irrevocable, set in stone like a chapter in a book that could not be rewritten. This was my choice. In selecting him, I had willingly embraced the loss of all that once mattered. The repercussions would inevitably follow. I was aware of that, yet, in this very instant, all that existed was the sensation of being desired, of being perceived in a manner I hadn't experienced in years. Yet an insatiable desire stirred within me, urging me to seek out more. The time had come. I could no longer turn a blind eye to it. The repercussions of my choices loomed ever closer, and despite my efforts to evade them, they remained perpetually at my heels, poised to overtake me at any moment. With each kiss shared with my husband, the burden of the secret loomed ever heavier upon my heart. Each shared moment became a quiet ache, as guilt pressed deeper into my thoughts. Neither with him nor with myself. On the eve prior, as I once more crossed that boundary with him, a transformation stirred within me. The exhilarating surge of longing that had once consumed me during our clandestine encounters was now absent. Instead, I experienced a profound emptiness. The euphoria had dissipated, revealing the harsh truth of my transformation. His touch lingered, the taste of his kiss remained on my lips, yet everything had shifted. The thrilling secret had morphed into a heavy load, a strain I doubted I could endure much longer. The significance transcended the mere action, the essence transcended mere physicality. It was the manner in which I had permitted myself to wander increasingly away from all that was familiar. The woman who had once walked her path with unwavering confidence now found herself adrift, enveloped by an enigmatic force that eluded her comprehension. The yearning for recognition, the craving to experience vitality in ways that transcended my marriage. The choices I made had taken me down a path from which there was no return. Yet, the most challenging aspect was confronting my husband. The moment my gaze fell upon him, the burden of my treachery pressed heavily upon my heart. Each time he inquired about my day, each time he offered that familiar smile filled with trust, it felt as though I was sinking beneath the waves. A sense of suffocation enveloped me, each breath heavy with the burden of my own guilt. I had transformed into a mere specter in his life, and it filled me with disdain. I loathed myself for inflicting this upon him, yet simultaneously, a fragment of my being was unable to relent. The atmosphere in our home was thick with tension. He was naturally aware of it. He could see, yet he remained unaware of the reasons behind my withdrawal, the cause of my newfound distance. He was unaware. He was unaware of his existence. The other gentleman. The man who had stolen from me something irreplaceable. The man who had stirred a part of my being I had yet to discover. A facet that yearned for thrill, fervor, and peril. Yet, the peril was undeniable, and I was acutely aware of it. I realized that if I failed to intervene, chaos would inevitably ensue. I found it impossible to continue navigating this dual existence. I could no longer maintain the facade of the devoted wife while covertly undermining every vow I had made. There were too many deceptions to count. The weight of guilt was unbearable. And yet, each time the thought of severing it crossed my mind, a profound, aching emptiness stirred within me. It transcended his singular existence. The focus was on me. Concerning the person I had transformed into, I made an effort to divert my attention. I immersed myself in my tasks, sought the company of friends, anything to distract from the solitude of my own reflections. Yet, whenever solitude enveloped me, the memories surged forth with relentless intensity, the weight of guilt, the pull of desire, the undeniable truth that I could never escape. His voice echoed in my mind. Behold the visage that lingered in my mind as I shut my eyes, yet I found no way to break free from it. That evening, I found myself seated opposite my husband at the dinner table, making an effort to appear composed, to embody the woman he believed me to be. Yet within I was far from that. The air was thick with unspoken words, and I sensed that the strain was palpable, not merely a figment of my imagination. He sensed it as well. He was perplexed by my sudden distance, my chilling demeanor. Yet I found myself at a loss for words. The truth eluded me, a secret I could not share, even if my heart yearned to do so. He extended his hand toward mine, and for a fleeting instant, I sensed the possibility of breaking beneath the heaviness of his worry. His eyes brimmed with an abundance of trust and love, enveloping me in an overwhelming embrace. I felt the urge to distance myself. I felt compelled to reveal the truth, to lay everything bare. Yet the words eluded me. Instead, I offered a faint smile, feigning that all was well, acting as if I hadn't just shattered everything. Later that night, after he had retired to his slumber, I found myself before the mirror, gazing intently at my own reflection. The woman gazing back at me was a stranger. The woman who had once possessed an unwavering certainty about her identity and desires. At that moment, I found myself adrift. I succumbed to a desire that enveloped me, leaving me at a loss for how to break free. He crossed my mind once more. The other gentleman, the individual who transformed it all. The man who had claimed what I had yet to realize I could offer. His gaze lingered on me, and I couldn't help but ponder its meaning. He had a way of making me feel as though I were more than merely a wife. Something beyond merely the individual I had transformed into. Yet it proved to be of no value. The devastation I had wrought was not worth the cost. The sacrifice proved to be in vain. The moment had arrived for me to decide. I could no longer endure this existence. I could no longer inflict pain on my husband, the one individual who had placed his trust in me above all others. Yet, I found myself unable to resist the allure, the desire that had been sparked within me. The life I once knew felt like a fading echo, and I found myself uncertain of how to reclaim it. Yet, I felt compelled to make the attempt, for him, for us. I found myself unable to proceed along this route, fully aware that it would inevitably culminate in ruin. The moment had arrived to confront the repercussions of my choices. It was time to cease existing within the fabrications, within the mirage of mastery. Having made my choices, I now faced the reality of living with them. The inquiry lingered. Was it within my capability?